Larry, when it comes to Donald Trump and his attitude toward NATO, what is your understanding? Because these new sanctions that he's talking to, he wants to impose on Europe, it shows how fragile NATO is today. It's not like what the Biden administration tried to picture for us, to draw for us. What is happening in NATO, in your opinion, right now?
It's in its dying days. It's coming to an end. Look, I must confess that I'm not at all upset with what Trump is doing to NATO. I think NATO has been I call it, a jobs program for white guys. It's been it was set up entirely or over the last 30 years to just provide additional general officer command positions, so-called command positions, without actually having any real strategic purpose. If anything, NATO has been working at cross purposes to its strategic purpose, which would be, peace and security. And instead of promoting peace and security, it's really become a vehicle for trying to promote conflict. So, I go back. I think one of the reasons that there was such opposition to Trump initially, and with respect to Russiagate, and why England got on board so early. I mean, remember, the Brits played a critical role, along with the CIA, in helping fabricate some of the intelligence, the Steele dossier and other things. And I think one of the reasons at the time was the fear that if Trump got in, he would bring an end to NATO, which, candidly is sort of exactly what's happening now. But Trump's vision for the future, or at least what was laid out in that national security strategy document, is that if Europe wants to, quote, defend itself against an imaginary Russian threat, then they got to pony up all the money and do it, because the United States is going to stop. And so on that one point, I agree with Trump. And I think that's what he's moving to do. But, and the Europeans are actually, I think they're in shock. They can't believe they're facing this kind of problem now.
But they're not learning anything, Colonel. I don't see any time soon if they would be interested in changing their sort of attitude in Ukraine.
I missed the first part of your question.
Europeans. I'm talking about Europeans. Considering all the pressures going to Europeans, I don't see Europeans changing their mind in Ukraine.
No, I don't either, because I think Merckx is leading them now in this idea that they can take that 5% that now apparently is approved across the major powers anyway. And even if they only get 3 to 4% of it, that will be the thing that revives their now very moribund, in some cases, but certainly struggling economies, particularly in Germany. That's their methodology now. That's their economic policy now. And they can't back off Ukraine, because that's what's giving them the threat to support with their people, they think, this additional expenditure. And the fact that it's going to be built back up with defense industry. Where have we seen this before? Scarily so. Where have we seen this before? By the way, Larry, thank you for introducing that idea about Lily White. I've always thought that the main reason Europe wouldn't let Turkey into the EU was partially economic, but partially disdain for Muslims. Now I have another reason.
You're
right. You're right. NATO is Lily White.
Yeah, those Turks are too swarthy to get in.
Yep. Jesus was swarthy.
Yeah, that's it.
We present him as Lily White, but he couldn't possibly have been. Where did he come from? He came from Palestine.
Larry, where are we going with the Kirill Dmitriev and negotiations he has with Steve Witkoff? Every time he comes, he went to Miami and talk with Steve Witkoff, Kushner. But what is the outcome of these talks?
Well, those talks, I think, actually have nothing to do with bringing an end to the war in Ukraine. Neither Dmitriev nor Witkoff have got the clout and standing to, quote, negotiate a deal. Look, Russia has been unequivocal on what its terms are. They have not backed off of that from 1 inch, from what Putin said on June 14th of 2024. And Putin reiterated it again a week ago Friday, a week ago today, when he had his end of the year press conference. They're not going to cede territory. They're not going to freeze in place. They're not going to allow Ukraine to have an 800,000 man army. They're not going to allow NATO peacekeeping forces into Ukraine. None of that's going to happen. And on top of it, that they're not going to accept. They haven't said this in public, but based upon my conversations with people in Russia and just understanding basic history, Russia is going to any agreement. Russia is going to require that it be like it be a treaty, that it must be ratified by the U.S. Senate. Any agreement with the United States must be ratified as a treaty with the United States Senate, voting to approve it. Why? Because barring that, you don't have any kind of legal agreement in place. You just have an understanding between a president who's going to be gone in 3 years, and that his views could easily be reversed in a heartbeat. So these negotiations, I think, between Dmitriev and Witkoff are looking to develop some economic projects that are going to be mutually beneficial to Russia and the United States, and that, maybe, I'd hope, but I'm doubtful, but that Trump is actually strategically thinking, okay, there's no way in hell I can get the Senate to back a peace agreement on the terms that Russians want. But if we get the camel's nose in under the tent, if we start having economic cooperation, that maybe, just maybe, that'll be a way to start restoring some normalcy to our bilateral relations. I would note that throughout all of this process, we've still had cooperation with the Russians on the space program, because Russia has been critical for helping keep U.S. astronauts having the ability to get to outer space. If it hadn't been for the Russians, once the space shuttle went down in early 2000s, we would no longer have had astronauts up at the space station. But we relied upon the Russians to take us, and despite all this other turmoil that's going on behind the scenes, the United States and Russia, at least on the space program, continued to cooperate. So I think maybe that it's that kind of cooperation that Witkoff and Dmitriev are talking about.
And the scary thing for me, Nima, is that Europeans, with the possible exception of Macron, who from time to time shows signs of sanity, are on a road to an inevitable conflict themselves as NATO minus America, and probably Canada too, with Russia. If nothing else, they're going to false flag it into existence, probably in the Baltic. This is very concerning, because they're going to lose their ass, but Russia's going to have a hard-pressed time about it too. And at the same moment, is going to be thinking, how can I do this? How can I take on, even if it's minus the United States and Canada, how can I take on NATO without probably giving them a demonstration? And the demonstration will be nuclear. It'll have to be, because that's the only way that you will have a hope of stopping it in the lurch, if you will, rather than having it eat away at both sides. Because Russia cannot stand really a war with NATO either. it evolves into even just the Europeans. It'd be tragic for the whole place. Everything, west of the Urals, it'd be tragic for it. And God knows what we would be then forced to do. We're playing with dynamite here.
Yeah.
And so are these European leaders. I don't care what their politics are. They're playing with dynamite.
Larry, the attack on the Russian tanker, do you think it was Ukraine drone attack? It was Ukraine or it was NATO? When we talk about NATO, I'm talking about the Europeans.
Yes. It's not either or. It's yes.
All of the above.
Yeah, it's Ukraine with the encouragement, support, and backing of primarily the UK. I think the UK remains the primary driver of the supply of intelligence and targeting information. But again, they're also getting that from the United States. So this is where Trump, despite claims to want to try to disengage, we've still got that part of the deep state that's continuing to funnel intelligence to the Ukrainians. And it was in the aftermath of that first attack on the tanker in the Black Sea that Russia then started bombing the hell out of Odessa and the bridges. And it's working on it's knocked out its power plants. It's working on destroying petroleum facilities, oil facilities. So, the Brits keep coming up with these good ideas. Hey, let's try this. This is really going to create a problem for Russia. And it turns out creating more of a problem for Ukraine.
Colonel, one of the points that Larry just mentioned is the Congress, the role of the U.S. Congress in the whole process of negotiations. We know what has happened with JCPOA and, Donald Trump coming in and just destroying everything. I think that is one of the most important experiences that Iran had with the United States, and Russia is not going to go, in that direction.
No, Larry's right. And the whole time he was talking about it, and I've given some thought to this beforehand, I think he's right about the Russian demand for a treaty. Think about Marco Rubio and his residual influence in the Senate and his influence with the president and with the leadership of the Republican Party, a certain part of it anyway. And think about others in the administration trying to deal with the Senate that is not ever going to give a 2/3 vote for a treaty with Russia.
Yeah.
They're just not. So we're talking about another instrument of stymieing any kind of progress in this conflict. I come back to what I said before. I'm really concerned about where we're headed in this because all of the ingredients are here. And more important than that, all of the incompetence is here and skullduggery is here to widen this conflict, not end it. And that's scary because, as I said, Russia's hands are going to be tremendously full if it does widen. And the inclination there is going to be to stop the widening. And that is only accomplished one way. Would it be a shock enough to the world that it would stop and go and contemplate its rear end for a while and think about what's happening, or would it escalate from there? I don't know. I've never been in this spot.